All right, folks, there's a lot of controversy over the removal of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. I think this will be the last time I have anything to say on the matter until there is a new Speaker, or at least until we're close to getting a new Speaker. Uh, there's a lot of infighting, even amongst people who consider themselves on the right. It is not just a simple establishment versus dissident outsider perspective. In fact, I think there's a lot of outsiders who just don't care because they don't keep up with Congress. Nothing that Congress does ever really affects them in a positive light, and so this fight just doesn't animate them. And it doesn't really animate me too much either. I think I'm in that more apathetic camp. I've been more apathetic about American politics in the last year than I have been in my entire life. I've dedicated my time to, other pursuits because, for even though I've never thought that there was really a big chance of improving things through politics, I did always kind of look at politics as sport, and not the sport in the way that I would root for one team or another, but sport in that I like to watch and analyze it, and I could I could get some entertainment value out of the game itself. And at this point, even when we have such a stunning move that has never occurred in the history of American politics, I still find myself rather apathetic. Nevertheless, there are still a lot of people who feel very passionately one way or another about this. And I'm going to go ahead and ignore the side, just the plain establishment shillery side, because those people don't matter. They don't represent like actual voters. The people who just unironically like Kevin McCarthy and everything he represents. Um, so I kind of want to look at like the Thomas Massie versus Matt Gaetz argument. Um, Thomas Massie is one of the most, I think, what's a good way of describing him? Calling him just libertarian does not do him justice. Because people, that word carries so much baggage. It makes people think of, Gary Johnson and trans furry marijuana farmers. When Thomas Massie, I think, is fair. I think it's fair to describe him as an enemy of the regime, and that's how he has carried himself. I think throughout his entire time in Congress, he's one of the more consistent guys. He is not. Actually, you could argue he is the most consistent member of Congress when you consider how long he's been there. He's been in Congress since 2010. Not many people go 13 years in the U.S. Congress and maintain their soul. But he is one who thought that it was a bad idea to get rid of McCarthy. He made some deal with McCarthy back in January, and I talked about or February or whenever it was, January, no. And I talked about this yesterday, that we were supposed to get this committee on the weaponization of the federal government. And that committee has gone nowhere. Nevertheless, Massie still argues that, hey, things were a lot. I was here under both John Boehner and Paul Ryan for their full terms as Speaker, and they were both much worse than McCarthy. And so he's basically making the argument, you upset the apple cart here. McCarthy, he might not be great, but it'll probably be worse, considering that the last two guys were significantly worse in his opinion than McCarthy. You get rid of McCarthy, you're liable to end up with someone who's as bad as Boehner and Ryan. And so it's kind of like, going from, if McCarthy's a stab in the eye, then Boehner and Ryan are a stab to the liver. But for me, that normally is not a very good enough argument, saying that, okay, this guy's bad, but he's not as bad as the predecessors. It's like saying, it's like, okay, you might not like George W. Bush, but I mean, oh my God, think about how bad John Kerry would be as president, right? So we all got to vote for George Bush. Am I right, America? And Thomas Massie is not normally the kind of guy to make those arguments. So what I would be interested in hearing as a counter to that from, let's say, Matt Gaetz, the leader of this movement to remove McCarthy. And I have to say, Matt Gaetz had some interesting allies. It was interesting who lined up on Matt Gaetz' side and who lined up on McCarthy's side, because the 8 folks that voted to remove McCarthy, I mean, it was a couple of people, maybe that you probably haven't heard of. There's this guy Rosendale, and then I forgot, it's not McClintock. What's the guy's name? Hutchinson, maybe, from Montana. And then Ken Buck. That was kind of, I understood Ken Buck. That was a name I've heard before, and based on what I've heard from him when I've heard him speak, makes sense that he wouldn't oppose, that he would oppose McCarthy. But then you have people like Nancy Mace voting against McCarthy, and then you have Marjorie Taylor Greene voting for McCarthy. It's just it's very strange. I mean, you would think if anything it would be reversed. Those two names, set off red flags for me. And I understand that Marjorie Taylor Greene formed an alliance with McCarthy way back at the beginning of the year. And so there's so much inside baseball that goes on here, so many backroom deals and corruption that goes on in Washington that decides these alliances, that maybe it's just better off not trying to understand them. But anyway, with all that said, I wanted to hear, what is Matt Gaetz' plan? Okay, we get rid of McCarthy. Okay, mission accomplished. So who do we replace him with? You need to replace him with someone better, right? And Matt Gaetz' answer, last I heard, was Steve Scalise. And I don't get it. I don't understand why all the fuss and fanfare over removing McCarthy if you're just going to replace him with Steve Scalise. That's like removing John Boehner to replace him with Eric Cantor, which almost happened. But thankfully Eric Cantor was voted out of office. He was defeated by in a primary by, God, I can't remember the guy's name. It's been so long, by the way, since we were primarying trashy Republican politicians. McCarthy's the kind of person who should have been primaried and never has, and there's lots of people who should have been primaried, like Mitch McConnell or Lindsey Graham, but thanks to Trump's endorsement, these people never really had to face primary challengers. Well, that's another story for another time. So anyway, if the end game is you get Scalise in there, to me this goes over like a wet fart, and I don't like to make bathroom analogies. I always find them disgusting, but I don't know how else to describe this. It's just, it's like, I like the idea so much. I want to get behind it. But it's like, we're going to have a revolution. We're going to overthrow Joe Biden. We're going to overthrow the U.S. government. And we're going to replace Biden. Once we overthrow him, we're going to replace Biden with Dick Blumenthal. Yay, Dick Blumenthal. It's like, wait, what? We had all that? We did, we fought a revolutionary war to replace Biden with Dick Blumenthal? It's just, it's a bit disappointing. And it just takes my enthusiasm out for I'm still glad McCarthy's gone. And like I said yesterday, the threat is a good thing. You want these people to be scared of losing their jobs. Okay? So this at least accomplished that. If Steve Scalise is only there because Kevin McCarthy was removed by a slim number of 8 Republicans, perhaps Steve Scalise will be a little smarter than McCarthy was. Just like I said, you want to correct the incentive structure, and perhaps that's all this is good for. It's just reminding House leadership how easily their power can be taken away. And if that's all that happens, maybe still consider that a win. In the short term, though, I still, if you sat me in the chair and I had to give an up or down, remove McCarthy or keep McCarthy, remove McCarthy every time. But it would just be pretty hard for me to make the argument to remove him to someone else who's not already on my side if I know that we're just going to replace him with someone who is rather comparable. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.